Hello everybody, this is Dragonzilla1991 here, and for today/tonight, depending on what time it is when you're watching this video, I will be talking about the second of Collecta's Mini Dinosaur tubes. The subject today is of course set 2, which contains the second batch of famous dinosaurs and prehistoric reptiles. Like we did with set 1, we're going to be taking a look at each of these magnificent creatures chronologically, from the earliest to the latest, and then we'll end with the rankings. Starting with the Jurassic period, as we have 3 representatives, those being 2 sauropods and 1 marine reptile. Our first reptile is the magical Leopleurodon! If you're a fan of the series Charlie the Unicorn, then you'll probably get that joke. Anyway, the first thing that you'll be quick to notice is that the Collecta-like Pleurodon, both miniature and large, are modelled on the Walking with Dinosaurs-like Pleurodon. In fact, that's how most merch of the animal are portrayed, with some exceptions. This is not only one of my favourite figures out of the set, but my favourite miniature-like Pleurodon in general. I would have showed him off in the Safari version from the prehistoric marine life tube, as well as the Kyoto Gashapons, but I forgot to dig them out. However, I do plan to talk about those particular miniatures at some point in the future, so you'll see them again. I like the colour scheme as it's based on the Walking with Dinosaurs version of the creature, as well as the sculpt. However, I have noticed some inaccuracies. For example, the tail lacks a fluke, to which we now know this animal had, but this model was made long before that discovery, and the way he has his front flipper stuck out, I'm not sure whether or not he could do that. However, those are the only nitpicks that I can actually see, as this is a lovely looking miniature, and in my opinion, one of the set's best. The first dinosaur in the set is the majestic Brachiosaurus, who, like the other sauropods, were the giraffes of the Mesozoic age. This is the classic depiction of the animal that we're all accustomed to. However, despite Collecta labelling him as Brachiosaurus, this is actually Giraffatitan. The story goes like this. Apparently Brachiosaurus was discovered in North America first, but the fossils were fragmented, and years later in Africa, a similar giant was complete, so it was believed that the 2 sauropods must be the same genus of the species. However, in the following century, both the American and African Goliaths were different, and because the African specimen was completed, the American dinosaur was modelled on it, and in old paintings, films, and other forms of media, we all assumed it to be Brachiosaurus, where it was actually his African cousin Giraffatitan the whole time. I think that's how the story goes. I do like the colour scheme being mostly blue, and I believe that I see a very slight tint of green in there, and I also like the head as well, even though this again was addressed to the African species Giraffatitan, and for what I've heard, Brachiosaurus' head was actually a little different. Collecta would re-release this miniature for their Mini Sauropods tube set, but as I said, it's the same miniature with no differences. The second dinosaur in the set is the Apatosaurus, which is my second favourite species of sauropod, and I absolutely adore this particular miniature. She is a lovely blue, to which I think is suitable for these animals. I doubt that sauropods would have been blue in reality, but nonetheless, it still looks nice. I love the spines running across her back, despite the fact that we have zero evidence of Apatosaurus possessing spines. Well, to my knowledge at least. I could be wrong. However, my favourite part of the miniature would be the pose, because the tail is curved pointing back, almost like it's going to strike something, and judging by the expression on the face, Apatosaurus looks as if she's defended herself from an attacking predator such as Allosaurus. Apatosaurus is a lovely looking miniature, and if you're a fan of the Jurassic Titan, then this will be on your top 10 list. Again, as was the case with set number 1, only 3 representatives from the Jurassic period. And now it's on to the Cretaceous, which of course has the most species, like in set 1. The first of these is another sauropod, but this is a smaller type compared to the Brachiosaurus and Apatosaurus that we've just looked at now. Anyway, this is a Margosaurus, which I believe was native to either Argentina or Brazil. However, it's a dinosaur from South America. Now, a Margosaurus is quite a unique looking sauropod. As you can see, he possesses some kind of spine formation running across his back. On the neck he has quill-like structures. I'm not 100% certain on what these are called, but they are what make this animal look unusual. I do love the colour scheme on this miniature, even though the deluxe version is duller in comparison. A Margosaurus may not be as impressive as the other 2 Jurassic sauropods, however he's still nice looking nonetheless. Here we have the almighty Spinosaurus, and this is one of Collecta's many Spinosaur models, but in this case he's a miniature of course. The figure is depicted as a quadruped because back in either 2014 or 2015, It was suggested that Spinosaurus may have actually walked on all fours, then it was portrayed as being fully aquatic, and now he's back on his hind legs, as seen in the new Walking with Dinosaurs. The sail appears to be the correct shape, and even though I do like the tail, but I do believe that it was actually tadpole-like rather than crocodile as seen on the miniature and his full-size counterpart. Speaking of which, I have the larger deluxe model, and I definitely want to talk about that one someday, so I don't want to go into too much detail because what I say on that one will also apply to the miniature. However, I will say that even though this particular incarnation of the animal is now considered to be outdated, I do like it and it may be my favourite out of set 2. Well, it's between him and the marine reptile like Pleurodon that we looked at earlier. Okay, the next representation of the Cretaceous is Gigantosaurus, the Goliath that surpassed Tyrannosaurus Rex in size. This miniature is pretty decent for the most part, but it's clearly just a scaled down version of Collecta's Carcharodontosaurus. And I may be wrong on this one, but I think Gigantosaurus might have been a member of the Carcharodontosaur family tree, and to my knowledge, Collecta doesn't currently have this animal at present. And at the time of making this video, so instead they've shrunken down their Carcharodontosaurus, painted him green, and labelled him as Gigantosaurus. They could have painted him brown, like the full-size version. However, if it was Carcharodontosaurus, with the brown paint job, then I suppose the set would have looked pretty dull, with having only one green dinosaur, that being Amargasaurus, and the rest were all either blue or brown, with one exception. The miniature is also shrink-wrapped, where it should be muscular, and he also possesses osteoderms, to which again, to my knowledge, we don't have any evidence of this animal having these. Except for the colour scheme, Gigantosaurus, or Gigantosaurus as some folks pronounce it, is a miniature that I do like, but yeah, in my opinion, he's one of the set's weakest. Another theropod, and it's a well-recognised species, which is of course Velociraptor, and yes, as you can see, this miniature possesses feathers. However, they seem to have been sculpted as fuzzy lines, but bear in mind that getting feathers to look super accurate in miniature is quite a challenge. Also, it's hard to tell because this is a scaled down version of the older feathered Velociraptor. However, the feathers do go as far as the snout, even though in life the snout was as avian as the rest of the animal. The colour scheme is kind of a bit bland and boring, being mainly all beige with the odd bit of blackening, but the pose makes up for all that, and she has her foot claws raised up, ready to attack, and she is hissing at something. Maybe it's a threat or perhaps prey. By the way, I say that it's female because with modern day birds, males have colourful feathers while females are dull. However, I'm not sure whether or not the same would have applied for velociraptors too, males being colourful and females dull. Again, like with Tyrannosaurus out of set 1, I believe that Velociraptor is the popular miniature of set 2. Up next is the pterosaur for set 2, Quetzalcoatlus, named after the Aztec god Quetzalcoatl. And despite Pteranodon being the inspiration for the kaiju Rodan from the Godzilla franchise, well, this titan of the skies was a real-life Rodan, as it was a lot bigger and mightier than its more famous and toothless cousin, who had already gone extinct by the time the giraffe-sized pterosaur evolved. He is posed standing with his wings folded, as this is how pterosaurs would stand, not in a bipedal posture as seen in cartoons. Otherwise, if they did, then they would probably break their backs. And his neck and chest are covered in a fur known as pycnofibers, to which I believe were to keep the animal warm, because the sky was really cool, temperature-wise, even during the Mesozoic era. When it comes to pterosaurs, I'm more into Pteranodon, as that's my favourite species of pterosaur, but for Quetzalcoatlus, I'm going to say that he's in either 3rd or 4th place, because my second favourite pterosaur is actually Rhamphorhynchus. Back on to the dinosaurs now, and we have Torosaurus, which is my second favourite member of the Ceratopsians, the first one being of course Styracosaurus. However, although I do like this miniature and the animal itself, but it's actually my least favourite out of the set. And I'm only saying that because I'm not really into these animals like everyone else. Well, that's because in recent times, Ceratopsians, particularly both Triceratops and Pachyrhinosaurus, have been overrepresented, not just in media, but merchandise too, and nearly a lot of other companies, mainly P&NSO, have been addicted and making models of these animals, which has honestly made me go off Ceratopsians. and I do wish that they would come back on them and make figures of not just other dinosaurs, but there are many more prehistoric animals that deserve to have their own forms of merchandise. And to be fair, they have started to do other dinosaurs again, and not too long ago, they showed off this beautiful looking marine reptile, which is called Dinocephalosaurus, and I would definitely love to add that one to the collection someday. Anyway, back to the miniature. I don't like the paint job, and I understand why they went for orange, because it's to make the set a bit more colourful. However, I don't see Torosaurus wearing this colour scheme in life. Also, the face appears to be elongated, which only makes the animal look kind of a bit ridiculous. I like Torosaurus, but for this miniature they could have done a better job. Finally is the armoured tank of the late Cretaceous period, and one of the last species of non-avian dinosaurs to evolve before the KT mass extinction event of 64 million BC, Ankylosaurus, who was pretty much the Stegosaurus of his day. Now I absolutely adore this particular miniature because Ankylosaurus is one of my all-time favourite dinosaurs, not only because it's cool looking, but because it was also the inspiration for Anguirus, my second favourite Godzilla character. I know many folks will pronounce it as Ankylosaurus, but I say it as Ankylosaurus because that's how Sir Kenneth Branagh pronounced it in the original Walking with Dinosaurs. I'm not a fan of the beige colour scheme again, however I do like the maroon red patterns running from head to club. But I do like the pose that he's in. His tail is raised up, indicating that he's on the defence from an attacking carnivore like maybe Tyrannosaurus Rex. And this is usually the iconic pose for this animal. I'm not too certain if this is meant to be a scaled down version of the old deluxe figure or it's its own sculpt. However, nonetheless, it's still a lovely looking Ankylosaurus. And there we go folks, that's the Collecta Mini Dinosaurs Tube Set 2, which is just as nice as Set 1 that we reviewed at the start of this year, 2025. And now time for the rankings, from least to best. So from Collecta Mini Dinosaur Set 2, the rankings are Torosaurus, Quetzalcoatlus, Velociraptor, Gigantosaurus, Ankylosaurus, Brachiosaurus, Amargasaurus, Apatosaurus, Liplorodon, Spinosaurus. Both sets 1 and 2 have now been covered, and a link to the review of set 1 is in the description below if you wish to check the video out. Now all there is out of this series is Mini Dinosaurs Tube Set 3, which is currently being written as we speak, but it won't be the next review. I'm not going to say what that will be, because I like all my upcoming reviews to be surprises, hence why I never say what the next one will be. So I don't know when I'll come around to cover set 3. It could be during the last 4 months of the year, or at some time next year, but hopefully this year, so I could say that set 1 debuted in early 2025, set 2 premiered in mid 2025, and set 3 broadcast in late 2025. Anyway, until then, this is Dragonzilla 1991 signing out. Take care, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye for now. It's the same miniature with no differences.
Sorry, I don't have an answer for that.
Alexa, shut up! Sorry about that. But I see no